started, if that's all right. All right, so we'll call this meeting to order. I do not see any public comment, so Mr. Oberst, would you like to start us off?
Yes, good afternoon, Ms. Schottky and Dr. Flores and Mr. Ross. The first item on the agenda, the action item, is our purchasing agenda, which is second and third page of your packet there. Generally routine acquisitions. We have a couple of bond projects that Ken provided some background information on a project for Frost Mechanical Improvements and the Museum High School. As we, gosh, Ken, we're what, about 2 months, 3 months from the thing being done, right? Museum High School?
End of July.
Yeah.
The two items in here, the campus and Frost Mechanical, that's our second bid package. The board had approved equipment pre-purchase. This is for installation this summer. These are the 2 of the 6 elementary buildings that will be able to complete air sometime this fall. You will probably not make it for the start of school,
Okay.
but it should be soon after that. And then the Museum High School, that's for work on the parking lot. There's landscaping that goes around that small park that's there. It includes lighting in front of the museum building. And this will actually be reimbursed through the DDA.
Oh, very nice.
And I do want to mention item B2 on the purchasing agenda, the $5,400, the Grand Rapids Children's Museum. We get to the donations part next. That's installment on the Kellogg Foundation grant, which you will see here just a minute here for approval. So.
All right, any questions on the purchasing agenda?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Yeah.
In the support materials section, the reference to Verizon, and I promise this isn't just because I think cell phones are price gougers, but I'm always just curious whenever there's a blanket order increase. I don't want to, I guess, be increasing folks' workload, but I always personally prefer some sort of, I guess, reasoning or explanation. I think it is related to, I guess to be candid, sometimes I question whether bidders low bid just to get the opportunity and then kind of changing it later. So I'm always just curious when I see an increase, particularly one of, 33%, basically, the where the disconnect was with the original bid and where we are now and why there's a significant.
Yeah, well, a couple things. Craig Garib routinely, every couple of years, rebids many of our technology contracts and make sure we are getting the lowest qualified bid. As you know, over the years we have had some challenges with some providers. They have a low bid, but everything else doesn't work out. The modification, most of that relates to the fact that, as you're aware, we continue to bring online new hardware from the technology, and it's just that more hardware came online than had been anticipated back when the blanket was, you see, almost a year ago now. So as we continue to roll out those devices, as you know, the teachers first and now to students and support staff, that's the need for additional wireless cards for those laptops.
Okay, fair enough. Just in general, it's probably likely a question I'll always have when there's a increase of some sort of blanket purchase order.
Got it. Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Dr. Flores? No? Mr. Klemperens, will you please remind me, forgive me if you've already told us this, can you remind me how we picked the schools, the elementary schools receiving air conditioning, what the prioritization was there?
We went back to the original list of elementary improvements on the bond list, which they were all in the phase 2.
Yep.
We determined which ones would be, basically air conditioning would take up the entire, or close to the entire amount, and what we could get done in a reasonable time. Would it make sense to advance them?
Yep.
And that's how we picked the list.
Okay. And then the 2 of the 8.
The 2 of the 8, just because as we started design, we found that they had existing conditions that would adapt to an
Pretty
advanced
easy rollout, easy-ish.
implementation.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Great, thank you for that clarification. Okay, can I have a motion to move forward the purchasing agenda to the full board?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
Item 2, action item, is a donation from Delta Dental for 3 water bottle filling stations at 3 of our schools, Riverside Middle, Southwest Community Campus, and Shawmut Hills. These were, understanding, Ken, they applied for these, which is why these 3.
Actually, Southwest and Shawmut applied on their own. The district through Christian Trevelyan applied recommending Riverside.
Thank you.
There were a few issues in where they would be placed, and in discussion with Delta Dental, they agreed to move one to Riverside. So that's why the 3 locations are listed.
Great. Any questions regarding donations?
I guess I want to understand the water bottle filling stations, who they're intended for. These, I mean, these the.
It replaces electric water cooler, a traditional electric drinking fountain.
Okay.
And on the top of it, it has a motion detector that you can fill a bottle.
Okay.
So it is, anyone who has a bottle can fill there, rather than trying to push the button and fill from a traditional drinking spigot.
Okay. I guess I was envisioning a kind of community coming to
It's,
fill bottles or something, or we were.
it's in the hallways,
Okay.
and it replaces an existing unit.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Good, other questions? All right, may I have a motion, please, to move forward donations to the full board?
Support. So moved, excuse me.
Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And then the second donation is from the Whitecaps Community Foundation. They delivered books, 5,000 books to 15 of our schools, and it's valued at actually $12,768, and that was, I believe, done last week, or week before last. We need your approval for those donations, too, for that donation.
Okay, questions about this particular donation?
I think Whitecaps is a great organization. Certainly thank you for this contribution.
Agreed. All right, may I have a motion to move forward this donation, please, to the full board?
Support.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And then the final donation is from an anonymous giver, $5,000 to be split, for us, $1,250 each for the 4 academies at Innovation Central. This same anonymous donor made a similar donation, or same amount of donation, a year ago also, and they've repeated that donation this year.
Questions about this donation? All right, may I have a motion to move this forward, please?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
And then we have a few grants here that need your approval to move forward to the full board. Steel Case Foundation, an extension of the Harvard Leadership Development, which many of our leaders in the district have attended over the last 3 years now. This is for another 3-year re-up, if you will, on that particular grant. The GRCF Foundation Challenge Scholars, $290,000. Again, you can see what that grant be used for. And then the third one is the Kellogg Foundation, as I mentioned just a minute ago. This is at $608,000 over 3 years in conjunction with the Grand Rapids Children's Museum to combat summer learning loss for preschool children. We were just awarded that grant just about less than a month ago, actually. So those are the 3 grants that fit with the strategies of the district, and I'd ask that you'd approve those also.
Questions about the grants?
Are we approving these collectively or separately?
You can either or.
Do you have a preference?
it's more expedient if you do all
I
three.
agree. I agree. I just didn't know if
I
you wanted
can-
me to pull one.
I can move approval.
Okay, very
All
good.
three of these grants, I think they're excellent grants, fit in line with what we're doing in the district.
May I have support?
Support.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Reports.
Report March financial statements, your dashboard report is in the front of that through March. So we are through 9 months of our fiscal year, again, tracking pretty much according to what we expect with, as I've said before, the major increases in our compensation related to the new GRE contract, primarily last year. Really everything else is in line with where we expect things to be. Again, the projected fund balance there in the middle, lower middle, is based on after Amendment 1, and about $10.6 million at 7.35%. We will have a second amendment bring in front of this committee at our next committee meeting, along with a draft of the 18-19 budget. So,
Great. Thank you. Warm, safe, and dry.
There's really nothing new to report on warm, safe, and dry. We do have a little money left, and we're monitoring, and we'll utilize that for potential emergencies if they come up. Bond projects. Over spring break, we moved 16 classrooms in Buchanan, from old building to new building. Now we have an outside walkway and a gap between the new building and the remaining old building. We're still working, contractor's working on the renovated part, and on track to be done 1st of August. Museum High School is moving along well, on track to be done end of July. City, we are continuing with phase 1. We have about probably 60% of the building relocated into temporary rooms. Over the summer, when they come back in August, the north half of the building will be done. Students will be in new classrooms, and then we're working on a plan for the south half, taking that and temporary space for those classrooms. And it'll be the challenge there is we'll have to have a tunnel through to the cafeteria wing. And we will have some challenges with where students and construction workers may cross paths that we have to work out the logistics. Right now, things have been going well, and we're on track for a May completion in 2019. University is moving along, should be done roughly Memorial Day time. So we'll have it for summer professional development. We talked a little bit about the 6 buildings getting air conditioning. 2 will be done late summer. The other 6 won't be done till spring break time next spring. We also are working on a number of elementaries, looking at modifying the front door entry for security purposes. We're working with Mr. Johnson on that to see what we can get done this summer, get those in place. And then Ottawa, Union, and Southwest Community Campus High School, we've begun the preliminary planning work for those projects.
Great.
Good question. While I know we'll do everything we can in regards to that overlap between construction workers and students, I'm just curious, historically, what measures do we take in such instances? I guess I'm wondering, do we sort of get a list from the contractor? Do we do any sort of cross-reference or background checking? Or I'm just curious on, typically speaking, how we handle such things.
Whether they're going to cross or not, if they're on site when students are on site, we require the construction managers to do a background check and submit it to us for verification. That's done through the iChat, through MSP. Where they cross, depending on how it works, we may have to limit that construction workers can't cross when students are between classes.
Yeah.
There's,
Fair enough.
there is some sensitivity of who comes in contact with who. Buchanan, we do have some, but they're not crossing every hour. They're going out to recess or to lunch. But we do the background checks regardless.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Okay, thank you. All right, back to you, Mr. Oberst.
All right, the last item there under policy in your packet is on April 10th, the House released their 18-19 school aid budget. And so we had previously seen the highlights of the governors and the Senate, so the PowerPoint in your packet now adds the third column, the House. So we'll just briefly go over these. Again, these are the major issues that would impact our district. There are some other things that are in there that may have some impact, but certainly not to the significance as what's before you here. So as you can see, total appropriations, Governor 14.6, Senate 100 million more, and House 100 million more. So all within $200 million of each other. The foundation allowance, as previously reported, the Governor 120 to 240. The Senate discounted that a bit, and the House came in the same as the Governor, so the 120 to 240. The 240 would be for us, the high level there. The high school additional $25, which was new last year. All three bodies said yes to that again. Transportation, Governor really didn't, there's no change in his transportation. The Senate added $1 million. What's currently in place is basically help for rural districts that have 7.7 or less students per square mile. So obviously it does not impact us. However, the House did provide in their budget a $25 per general ed rider, which would be available to us for our general ed riders, and we'll look at the impact of that at the end here. The GSRP program on page 3 now, which is preschool. Again, no funding, really no change from the current year, and all three bodies in Lansing said leave it the same. At-risk funding is probably the area that is still up for debate and changes. Now, the dollar amount is not. It's all right around $500 million. All three bodies, Lansing said, yeah, $500 million. What is the hang-up right now is the accountability language surrounding 31A. That the Governor made some changes to where it is currently, and really pushed out the first accountability into the 2021 year. The Senate and House, well, the Senate agree with the funding level. They don't like the Governor's language, so right now they are with the current language, which the challenge with the current language is beginning next year, the 18-19 year, the accountability would first kick in, and if you don't meet the benchmarks, and the requirement is that you take half of your total 31A funding, let's say for third grade reading literacy, you haven't reached the benchmarks. You're only 50% of your students are there. So you take half your total 31A funding, then you take that 50 percentage points on that, and then you have to use those dollars amounts specifically. Tutor programs, things specifically to third grade literacy, or if it's 8th grade math or 11th grade college and career readiness. If you don't meet those standards beginning the 18-19 year, you're limited as to how you can use your 31A dollars. You have to put it specifically. So the Treasury, I think, has come out with some, or MDE has come out with some projections how this might impact some school districts, and some school districts 90% of their 31A funding would have to be put into a third grade reading and eighth grade specific to things like tutors. And that left only 10% for everything else that they have been funded with 31A. So it's that particular issue is not good. The Senate right now is discussing it. As I said, as we've talked before, it's up for further discussion. The House has left it as it is now, which is not good for us. The governors, there is limits. These proposal for next year, there would be limits on the spending, but the good thing is it wouldn't kick into 2021, and things may change by then, as I said before, with a new administration coming into place in November. Things may change. So that's probably the area at-risk funding where there's a lot of difference yet. And again, it's not dollars, but it's accountability. So we'll see what happens when this thing is finalized.
Question, clarity.
Yes.
And, so I get if the measure isn't met, then half of the $31A as a district. And then I get that part, but you said a percentage of that.
Yeah,
half.
They start out with half the total money.
Yep.
And then depending on your percentage deficiency in the measure, you take that percentage deficiency, let's just say it's 50%.
Oh, okay.
And you take that 50% on that half. So it's 50% of 50% in my example, as an example.
Yeah, so
would have to be used for, let's say it's a third grade reading, it be spent.
Yeah. So,
and it specifies at that point what you can spend what you need to spend that money on.
I get that. So the just a clarification, Eddie, the second number, I get the half as the initial divisor, but then that second number is determined by the percentage of the deficiency.
Basically, yeah. In simple terms, yes. That's correct.
Mr. Oberst, could you also amplify your comment that it's not good for us to zero in on these three metric benchmarks, if you will, or targets?
No, the benchmarks are good.
Mm-hmm.
The ramifications of not meeting them would limit significantly your ability to fund other 31A programs that you're currently. Obviously, the focus is on that. Right now, we have 31A restrictions. Pretty much we can determine as a district what's best to spend the money on to assure third grade reading literacy, eighth grade math, 11th grade college and career readiness. So we get that right now, that we have that ability to determine what works for that. And that's a lot we use that 31A dollars. That's the focus, but 31A dollars we use for other purposes too, obviously. When you don't meet the benchmark, again, starting next year, as I said before, and you really have to reallocate dollars to what's now being dictated by Department of Education. If you're third grade, what if you're deficient, which many of these districts, and I can't remember how many districts it's like 47 districts they've identified that potentially could have about 90% of their 31A dollars dictated how they had to spend it. So they would have to cut other programs that are currently other worthwhile programs that are currently being funded with 31A dollars, because they'll have to now be focused on those three areas of benchmarks. That's what's not good about it. So again, everyone agrees on there should be accountability, but what that accountability should look like and how soon it should kick in is what's being debated right now.
Yeah, and not to belabor this point, but to understand just what our priorities are. Is there any analysis that we could get on just what we fund out of at-risk funding and where they fit within these target areas? I ask that because of my history with Title I programs and whatnot. When for years the federal government provided additional supplemental funds to districts across the country, and those funds then got diverted into the general fund, dispersed to all buildings that had children that were below in reading net levels or in math levels. Rather than concentrating those resources where they were intended to be concentrated, where the students were totally without support to close the achievement gap and to improve their achievement. And I think that sometimes that is a fault of districts that think in terms of spreading this wealth around to all students in all buildings and providing pet projects that people develop, thinking that that's the way to go, rather than concentrating those dollars on fixing the issues that impact third grade reading, for instance. I used to use an example of if you had a airline fleet of planes and you had 3 of them on the ground and the rest of them were flying, and the 3 needed major parts, and you diverted those funds and gave everybody, for every one of those planes that are already flying, part of that resource. Then your planes that are on the ground would never get off the ground because they don't have enough funding targeted to those parts that they need, critical parts, to be able to fly again. So I would hope that in our discussions in the future and planning processes, the dollars have to follow the services and the needs. So
They do, and in fact, there are statutory measurements as to which buildings get both title dollars or 31A dollars and how much they get, depending on the needs of those buildings. So yeah, we have that. We have a whole crew of folks that spend most of their time monitoring that. Obviously, we go to the budgeting process every year. We start with, it's part of the budgeting process, the anticipated 31A and title dollars that will be allocated to that particular building for the upcoming budget year, and what those dollars can be used for, should be used for in terms of the next year budgeting process. So yeah, we do have that information, and we can pull that together.
it would be good to look at. Again, I think that we have a critical need when you look at the achievement data for third grade students who are on reading level. And I guess I've used the terms before. What we currently do is unacceptable in terms of achievement rate. It is deficient, and unless we look at marshaling our resources and targeting those resources to address that critical need, we're going to find ourselves not meeting the benchmarks necessary in the future. And rather than someone else correcting us, it'd be wonderful if we did that ourselves.
Okay.
Mr. Obrist,
Yes.
Do you have any sense, based on most recent data, do you have any sense of what percentage we would be needing to allocate in the scenario that's been laid out in the governor's speech?
I haven't. I can do that by going back to, it's not a simple process, because we go back to last year's test. It's going to be based on the 17-18 test scores testing, which obviously those results aren't done yet.
That's
go
fine.
back and make some estimates, but
if it's not a simple process, it's not going to change anything, so no need to put effort into it. I was just more curious, but okay. Thank you.
It's safe to say that it's not likely we would meet all the benchmarks, so there would be some impact to this district.
Yeah, likely.
So, yeah. All right, page 4 of the summary, career technical education. The governor added $5 million on a per student basis, $25 to $50. The Senate said, we'll increase funding by $5 million, but only available to ISDs that don't have a CTE millage. And of that $5 million, half of it needs to be spent on equipment. The other half can be spent on programs or anything else. House doesn't change the current law on CT spending. Shared time, which is one of the areas that the governor has been working to reduce for the last couple of years in particular. Again, he limited shared time FTEs to 5% of the district's enrollment. Senate eliminated kindergarten, but their limit was on a FTE from 0.75 to 0.67. Again, that would not impact us. I don't think we have any shared time FTEs that exceed 0.4 or 0.5. Kindergarten would. That's worth about almost $400,000. The House is the best. They maintain the current law, which would include shared time for kindergarten still, and no limits on the rest. The data analytics, which funding for that came into the budget, I think a couple of years ago. The governor, one of the programs he wanted to eliminate, both the Senate and House, said, no, let's leave it in, had $1.5 million. The MIPSR's contribution rate is going to go up. That's by virtue of changing the discount rate under all three proposals. They all agree. Page 5, then, this is another MIPSR's 147A, and that's $100 million that comes in and goes out to districts that ISDs did not get a portion of that. The Senate wants to add $5 million for ISDs. The House and the governor are maintaining the $100 million, which has been the case for the last couple of years. The MIPSR's rate cap buy down essentially is over $1 billion now from the governor. That's the amount that goes directly out of the school aid fund, directly from school aid fund into the MIPSR's plan. Both the House and Senate concur with the governor on that $1 billion. Special ed remains funded at $1.4 billion. They all agree on that. Cyber school funding, governor wanted to reduce the foundation allowance to them. Right now they get a full foundation allowance. He wanted to reduce it by 25%. Both the Senate and House said no, 100%. Itinerant funding capped at $2 million. All three groups said yes on that. ISD funding, governor and House are left that the same as this year. The Senate increased it by 1% in their proposal. So those are the major categories that would impact us the most. If you look on the very last page, and I've tried to do based on current enrollments, if you will, what I think this may look like in terms of new revenue. So the foundation allowance is worth about $4 million from the governor and the House proposal, a little bit under that for Senate. The transportation payment based on our average current ridership would be worth $127,000 to us. The CTE payment, that's just kind of a shot in the dark at $5,000 potentially. And then the shared time limit, you can see their elimination of that revenue in the governor, it's $1.3 million approximately, and then $372,000 when the Senate just eliminates kindergarten. So the bottom line there, in large numbers, you can see estimated additional net revenue under the three proposals. Governor 2.6, Senate almost $3.5 million, and the House is the most favorable to us at $4.1 million. So as I've said before, the revenue consensus estimating conference, I believe, is May 15th or May 16th. No final budget will happen until after that. I will tell you that both in February, there was a revenue consensus estimating conference in January. The revenues to the state in both February and March to both the general fund and the school aid fund were above those projections that were made in January. So the revenue side, things look positive. So I don't think by the time we get to May for that estimating conference, unless something significantly catastrophic happens, it looks like funding will be available probably for any three of these plans since they're within a couple $100 million. So it will go to presumably a conference committee to work out some of the differences in the end. Again, as I said, the big thing out there is a 31A accountability language, and we should have a final budget by June 1st. So questions, comments?
No? Good.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. I believe that concludes. Anything else from either of you for the good of the cause? All right. Anything else?
Thank you.
Good.
Good. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.